Today we are going to talk about importance of the Saxo Grammaticus account for research on Slavic religion, pre-Christian religion and mythology. Actually, what do we know about Slavic religion today? And what we know, it's not much, and primarily this is all speculations, because we don't have a lot of sources. We don't have none of primary sources, and secondary sources we have, they're written by those people who actually destroyed this pre-Christian culture. And when actual scientific research on this topic started in 19th century, we've got really bizarre reconstructions by those researchers who started this work. And this didn't change much even in 20th century, and even with new researchers who didn't just rely on folklore data or literary data, but try to use archaeology. And one of the famous researchers, actually Boris Rybakov, academician, Russian academician, what reconstruction he created, which was also quite bizarre, and it actually spurred off very strange neo-pagan cult, which is probably has nothing to do to the real, authentic Slavic religion. And among these mentioned sources we have about something like 2 dozen of Old Rus texts, which are really fragmented, very short, and quite biased. We have half a dozen Arabic sources and about again 2 dozen of Western Latin sources, which are more detailed and less biased, but still this is not quite what we wanted to see. And there is no surprise that these Western sources, Latin sources, are more quality ones than Eastern ones. Because Western imperial Christianity from its beginning actually still use the legacy of classical world, and the very church fathers of 3rd and 4th centuries, they were either Hellenistic philosopher by their day jobs like Origen, or were trained as such as Jerome or Cappadocians, Basil the Great, and Gregory Nazianzus, or they get really good classical education like Ambrose, like Tertullian and Augustine. And actually not all of them were really even about this legacy. And for example, Tertullian had opinion that Christian culture has nothing in common with classical culture, but still he used standard devices of the classical rhetoric, and some call him a Christian sophist. And Jerome was tormented by this unbreakable legacy with the classic culture, and he bitterly called himself Ciceronian rather than Christian, and took a vow not to touch classical works, which he, as it could be expected, broke few years later. But for example, Cappadocians, Basil and Gregory, they were remembering the year they spent in Plato's Academy in Athens at the best years of their life. And this classical legacy of inquisitive learning was still alive even in the end of first millennium, and for West it was even more important than for Byzantium, where in Byzantium we see still a lot of so-called humanistic works which are not bound by Christian limits and has more connections to classical literature. And for West it was really important because chain of events actually at the end of first millennium was a prospect for Western Church either to use all this classical legacy to survive or die. Because originally, when Charlemagne in 8th and 9th century created his empire, it was met very enthusiastically by clergy, which expected they will have Western clergy. They expected that they will have their own empire, not worse than Eastern Roman one, the Byzantium. But these hopes were violently broken at the like middle of 9th century and 10th century, when we have all these raids of Vikings and Saracens, and basically during these 2 centuries Europe became a wasteland with islands of strongholds and castles of local aristocracy, and all independent centers of wealth and culture and learning were destroyed, and clergy actually became some kind of puppets on the pay stub of these warlords, and warlords not really wealthy and technologically and culturally advanced or influential states. So this challenge was met by a generation of actually passionate reformers of the church reform of the end of 10th and through 11th century, who wanted to create a papal monarchy which would guide this royal authority in the direction of acquiring wealth, acquiring technologies, acquiring influence, and most important, they wanted to make clergy independent and even on low level. And we have all these universities popping out. Actually, this is a result of this reform. And there is no surprise that in these accounts of the monks on Slavic paganism, pre-Christian religion, we have elements of this classical inquisitive learning and today's tradition of learning. Unfortunately, we don't see that this tradition of inquisitive learning made its way into church culture of Old Rus, because this Western church reformation didn't touch Eastern Byzantine church, and actually the way those people who drove this reformation actually were initiators and deliverers of this great schism between Western and Eastern Church. And those Christianizers and Kulturträgers of the Byzantium who Christianized Rus, they apparently were quite mediocre clergy, and they either were not familiar with these classic accounts, or were not and traditions, or were not interested in disseminating of these traditions in Old Rus. And those people actually were coming not from cultural centers of Byzantium, but rather from cultural outskirts, from Balkans. And in Old Rus church library translated to Church Slavonic, we don't see, of course we don't see classical works, and we don't see these humanitarian Byzantine works, and those sermons against pagans we get most information on Slavic religion from. They actually really short, these accounts, and not descriptive, and probably just mindlessly copied from one document to another. And problem here also, these accounts were written not at the time of active practicing of the Slavic pagan religion. They were written a century 2, 3 or 4 after that. And on one hand we have supposedly so strong culture, pagan culture, was retained for these so many centuries, but on the other hand we don't have much of detailed information about this culture. So the question arises, what's going on there? And this could be explained by different means, but one of the explanations was introduced by some specialists, and they were talking about not a double faith or the Vaiveria, which was criticized by these sermons, but rather triple faith. That these sermons criticize not really the original Slavic so-called pagan beliefs, but rather those beliefs which finally made this way from the Byzantium, and maybe some kind of influence of classical accounts. And it makes even more important to see at Western accounts and compare them with Eastern. And we don't have much of the common lines there. For example, we have some parallels of Pirun and Proven, have some parallels between Geravit and Yerila, and this is actually Yerila, not a part of actual accounts. This is something from folklore sources. So it has even like more suspicion that these Eastern sources are not exactly talking about real pagan Slavic religion and mythology. Those Western accounts of the monks who wrote about Slavic pre-Christian religion, like Helmold, Herbert, Ebbo, Preflingensis, Adam, Titmar, Widukind, they are not free from ideological agenda, of course, and we read there some derogatory language toward the pagans, some demonization. We see the Christian didactics, see moralization. We see praising of particular regal or clergy persons, but still we have, as it was mentioned, a lot of detailed account on this religion. We have some kind of attempts to analyze it, to classify, to compare with classical accounts, and we even have some kind of interviews with pagan priests. And also on the backdrop of this account of Saxo Grammaticus is even more detailed and less biased than all others. Again, we still see some words, we still see some didactic, but this didactic, for example, is not about some kind of strength in faith of Bishop Absalom, but he praises his humanitarian treatment of the pagans. Saxo Grammaticus doesn't blame pagans for their superstition, and actually advocates that like many people didn't seriously believed in all these bizarre accounts and stories and all these rites, and this superstition was product of some kind of coincidence. So he is really kind to them, and all this ideological bias, of course, in others could be somehow filtered using narrative analysis, but this account of Saxo Grammaticus is very handy baseline of minimal bias. So if we see something more advanced or extreme in other authors, we can just automatically dismiss it. So it's very handy. Unfortunately, this account of Saxo Grammaticus in book 14 of his Gesta Danorum history has very few translations to English and Slavic languages, and those translations either really fragmentive and has some problems and not descriptive, either they are not easily achievable for general public. So this project of new translation of materials of Saxo Grammaticus on Slavic pre-Christian religion aims of making these accounts widely available for general public and for specialists. So any support of this project is very welcome, and there is a campaign for crowdfunding, so any help again is welcome, and I hope this campaign will make this publication faster and easier.